Remember the spot, Brian? I think you were 4 and Tom was 5. Right before Tom started kindergarten.
Yeah, I remember. I also remember Tom pushing me in the lake, right over there.
Yep, those were the good old days, all right. You all didn't have much to worry about back then, but now you're just like me and the rest of us. Too much work and not enough vacation. Hey, thanks for coming out on such short notice.
Yeah. You'd think I'd get more than just a couple of weeks of vacation, you know? I clock 50, 60 hours a week at work. Leaves me no time during the week to spend with Shannon and the twins. And I use the weekends just to catch my breath. Yet somehow, I end up with extra vacation at the end of the year.
Well, son, all I can say is you have just one chance with your family. Don't blow it. Life ain't no rehearsal.
When we were growing up, how much vacation did you have? You never really took vacation. Either that, or you just didn't spend it with us.
Well, you had your mom at home with you boys all the time. I guess I never took much vacation because I could bring home more money if I worked.
Yeah, I wish we had more memories of me and you, you know?
Well, you know what they say. Life gets in the way.
I just wish it had gotten away when we were growing up.
What's going on with that hook anyway? Give that here. Here you are, a growing man, and still can't bait your own hook. Sheesh. What'd they teach you in school anyway?
Whatever, Dad.
You know, still don't know why you're at that job of yours. You know, if you change careers, you could find something with better benefits and more vacation. You were always great at school. Your teachers always told your mom you were one of the best. It just seems like you could have done something different, you know?
Huh. Haven't we had this conversation before? We've been out here 5 minutes, and I feel like you're already on my back.
I don't think you're a disappointment. It's just I guess I would have done things a little differently if I were you.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Well, when you were growing up, I made a promise to myself that well, whatever. You turned out all right, didn't you? Can't blame me for that.
Dad, I don't know what you had in mind for this fishing trip, but just because I was willing to take a week off work, away from my family, to hang out with you, does not mean we get to have that time back. What were you going to say? What was this promise you were talking about?
Oh, nothing. It doesn't matter. What's done is done.
Well, what do you mean by that?
Don't worry about it. Hey, have you heard from your friends Luke and Dave lately?
Not as often as I'd like. I kind of miss those guys.
You know, it's really neat that you've known them for so long. I can't believe you all have stayed so close.
Yeah, I don't think it's normal for people to have friends since kindergarten, especially 3 friends. You know, I'm pretty lucky to have grown up with those guys.
You know, I wish your mom and I would have had friends like that, but we spent so much time being busy. Well, I did anyway. We sort of missed out on that.
You know, Dad, seems like you're always saying stuff like that. You've got a lot of time. I mean, you've got a lot of free time now that you're retired, right?
Free time. Yeah. That's something I'm still trying to get used to. I rarely ever took vacation, and now I have too much time. Too bad I didn't take more vacation time when you and Tom were growing up. I think I'll come out and visit you this October.
Yeah? This October? Do you know what time in October? I mean, I got to plan these things pretty far out. With Shannon and the twins, I have to be really careful on how I use my vacation time.
Yeah, I know, but I want to come out before it gets too cold. Plus, you move so far away. It's easy to see your brother. He didn't move too far, but for whatever reason, you took off.
Yeah, I know you weren't really a fan of that decision, but look, Pop, we got the rest of the afternoon, and I think it's going to be sweet. Look, you even got a bite.
So have you had any conversations take place like that? It's not ideal. There's a little bit of tension going on, things said between the lines. Dad wishing things were different, son wishing things were different. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about during this series, Family Matters. What matters to these two guys up here? What matters to the son? We talked about that last week. What matters to the dad? In fact, let me ask you, what really matters to parents? Seriously, what do you think matters? What do parents really, really want? What matters? Safety of the family, what? Happiness in the family, yeah. What else? Come on, y'all. I got a lot of parents in here. What do you want? Communication. Maybe some vacation. Would that be good? Yeah. I know I speak for my wife. She won't say it, but the ability to just go to the bathroom by yourself. Anybody along for that? Yeah. If I could just, do this privately. It's a private act. If you could just leave, that'd be good. Keep inviting yourself in. What else do you long for? Bill Cosby, he actually says most parents long for silence. Yeah, anybody want to vote for that? Yeah, exactly. We were just talking about this the other day. Little recap. I live in a house full of women. I'm the only guy, and they talk a lot. My girls say like 500 kabillion words a day. I'm up to about 10, And so it's a little overwhelming. Love them. Totally married out of my species, but I'm feeling a little overtalked. And we're having another girl, by the way. But so I could long for some silence occasionally, out by the trash can, whatever. And so, what do you long for as a parent? There's a lot of things that we can laugh about, but then there's some really honest ones that you guys have said, like safety. I just want my kids to be safe, and I want open communication, and I want a good relationship. I want them to think I'm somewhat cool, I want them to love me. There's a lot of things that I want as a parent. But there's kind of an overarching theme to all of these things. And we find this theme in the Bible quite frequently about what parents really want. What matters to a mom? What matters to a dad? No, that's not it. Love is... No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, love is part of it too. But it really has to do with this one word. And we find it in the fifth commandment. God's big 10 list found in Exodus. And the word is honor. And love is a part of that. And communication is part of that. And relationship is part of that. And that you want to be with me is part of that. And so it's honor. So today, we're going to take a look at this topic of honor. Because I'm telling you, for me as a dad, that really does matter, that my kids honor me. And so what does that mean? Hey, let's look at Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. And this is that fifth commandment here. And probably this is familiar to you. This probably isn't new. It says, honor your father and mother, and then you're going to live long and prosper. That was not it. Then you're going to live long and have a full life. So there's a promise attached to that. But there's some qualifiers that you don't see in there. For instance, there's no time limit, right? This isn't void and nullified when you're 18. It doesn't matter. As Dave said earlier, it doesn't matter how old you are and how old your parents are. You could be sitting in here today and be 80, 85. Your parents could be 100. And this still applies to you. Okay, that math doesn't work out. Probably 105. This still applies to you. All right? There's no age limit. Hey, the other thing is there's no time limit on this deal. It doesn't matter how old you are. You're supposed to honor. So there's a couple questions that come out of this. Why do you suppose that God gave this commandment? Why is this big enough that it was part of the 10? I mean, why? There's some big commandments in there, right? Name a few. Yeah, don't shank anybody, don't kill anybody, right? And then there's other things like don't covet and don't commit adultery and, don't do all these other things. And he throws in, oh yeah, and you should honor Your parents. That's a pretty big deal. And so I think there's a couple reasons. If you got your program, you might want to flip it over, grab a pen, steal one from your neighbor, and write down a couple of these things. You can reflect on them later this week and really take an assessment of your relationship with your parents. And again, it doesn't matter how old you are. As Dave said earlier, you didn't get here without a parent. So this applies. And today also, this time that we're going to spend together, super, super, super hardcore practical. All right? You're going to have some homework going out. And so hardcore practical today. So there's some thoughts. So question is, why did God put this commandment in here? Why did he give it to us? And I think there's a couple reasons. Here's the first reason. There are no perfect parents. Yeah, the kids are like, yes, it's finally been said, right? There are no perfect parents. Don't except yours. Excellent. Oh, because your mom's here. Good. Way to kiss up, Jim. There are no perfect parents in this place, in this world. Hate to burst your bubble, but we've all been sitting here, right? We've all been in this drama. We've all had these conversations. We have regrets, and all of us have weaknesses and faults and mistakes and inconsistencies. And really, only God is the example of a perfect parent. Other than that, there is no other perfect parent. It doesn't happen. The Bible says that we've all sinned, which literally means we are all warped. You're like, are you describing my family? Yes, we are all warped. There's a great book out there called I'm Dysfunctional, You're Dysfunctional. Pretty much sums it all up, right? Yeah, it's true. There's no perfect families. And you may have even come from a family where we're kind of, smiling about this a little bit, but you may be coming from a family where you're like, yeah, dude, that's true. My parents were anything but perfect. Almost like your parents are unworthy of honor. Don't raise your hand, but man, if I asked you, do you feel that? Tons of your hands would go up in here. Because maybe there was abuse that went on, physical or sexual or mental or whatever, emotional. Maybe your parents were manipulative or neglectful of you. But the real question when it comes to this commandment is what is God trying to tell you to do? What is he telling me? Am I just supposed to just forget all of that? Is that what this fifth commandment means? That I'm just supposed to ignore the pain and put on a happy face and okay, that's what mom and dad need. They need honor. Great. I'll just do that. Just pretend like everything's great. And I do not believe for one second that God is saying that here. I don't think that he is telling us that we're just supposed to forget all that stuff that has shaped us in so much of our life. But the key here is we cannot throw out this commandment. We can't just throw it out of the mix. Because God gave it to us. And I think the real issue here, when it comes to honor, is that God is calling us to honor the position and not necessarily the personality behind parenthood. Does that make sense? That God is calling us to honor the position. So that's what every parent wants, is to be honored. So why did God give us this commandment? Well, first, because there are no perfect parents. None. Except my mom, who will listen to this on YouTube later. The second commandment, the second thing is that not only are there no perfect parents, but honoring our parents totally teaches us something about authority, doesn't it? It teaches us this crucial, critical lesson about authority. It determines, really, listen here, it determines how, teenager, if you're in here, how you're going to be in school, in adults, how it is that you interact in your careers and in your jobs, and listen, in your marriages, in your relationships, in your future families, in your current family. It is a critical lesson on how you interact with people. And I guess another way to say it is the parental role, this honor, determines how I function in other relationships. Exactly how I function with my parents at home is how I'm going to function with the world. And it's the thing that I learn. It's the style of relating that I learn as I grow up that I'm going to carry on in life. And you've probably heard this, but if you're a dad with daughters, here's a key for you. If some gorilla comes over to date your daughter, you really want to check out how he treats his mom. I mean, follow this guy around. Freak him out. Tag him, Peer over his shoulder. I want to know how guys treat your daughters, right? And before they ever gain a date with my daughters, dude, what kind of position does your mom hold in your life? Do you show her honor? What does that look like? Because that's going to translate into marriage later. So I believe that's why God gave us this commandment. Very, very important commandment. Now, here's the question that we're going to spend the bulk of our time today. The question is how? Wow, that's a multi-million-dollar question right there. How do you honor your parents? Because we would probably have a long list, and we would agree with some and not agree with the other. But what does the Scripture say? How do I honor my parents? How do you honor your parents? Because some of you have some really deep hurt. Some of you feel like, dude, my parents are not worth honoring. There are things that you may have never talked about that maybe nobody else knows about your life. And you're struggling with this. You're like, seriously, how am I supposed to honor my dad who abused me? How am I supposed to honor my mom who was just, just horrible with me? How am I supposed to do that? So we tend to turn a blind eye to this commandment sometimes. Well, I want to dig down into that. I think the answer kind of determines on what life cycle you're in, what stage of life you're in. All right, let me explain. How I honor my parents is way different as a child compared to an adult. Would you agree? Yeah, okay, so here it is. As a child, how do I honor my parents? Ephesians 6:1 says it this way. Children, obey your parents. This is the right thing to do because God placed them in authority over you. How do I honor my parents? I do it by obeying and respecting them. I totally do. I do what they say, willingly, pleasantly, immediately. The Bible teaches that if I respect my parents, I'm going to live long. That's pretty cool. And as a dad, that's what I want. I just want to be obeyed. Really, I just do. I just want you to pick up your toys, pick up your toys, pick up your toys. Hey, would you pick up your toys for the 16th time? I just want you to obey me. And I want to be respected as a dad. It was so funny. The other day I was swatting Bailey, and it's, I don't know where you land on the topic, but I totally beat my kids. Just kidding. Great. So, no, I lovingly discipline. Let me tell you the process. I just don't swat her. We take her upstairs, or Addie, and we sit down and we say, honey, now listen, what you did was inappropriate, yada, 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 and do you know what you did? Yeah, I haven't even swatted her. She's like, and they just immediately bust out. Haven't even swatted her, a little bummer. And so, do you know what you did? Yes, I know what I did. What'd you do? Tell me, great. And so then I'll give her a swat, and then she cries, and we talk about it, and I tell her how I feel about her, and then we pray together, and then she tells me why she got a swat, and so she understands, and we go through this whole long process, and I was telling her, she's just bawling. She's bawling in tears. I mean, she's huge. Tears, nuclear. And she's just sitting there and she's crying and she's broken. And I'm like, Bailey, I just need to explain to you, this is not easy for me as your dad. And I hate spanking you. And she stops crying. She goes, Dad, hey, we don't say spank in our house. Oh, I'm sorry, we don't say hate in our house. Oh, yeah. And I just felt so disrespected. And I know she wasn't meaning it, but as a father, all I want is just respect for my parents, or for my kids. I just want them to obey me and respect me as a dad. It's the thing that I cherish the most because that translates to honor for me. So as a child, honor is brought on by obeying and respecting. Now, later on in life, it changes a little bit. Honor looks totally different. So if you're in here and you're with Vertical or Fusion, our student groups, this is really for you and for you as an adult. Because once again, if you're 80, you are still a child of somebody. And honor looks totally different as we grow up. As a teenager, as an adult, I can honor my parents by accepting and appreciating them. That's really key, by accepting and appreciating them. See, the older I get, the more I start to see the faults of my parents. Anybody amen to that? Yeah, hey, I ain't going to do things the way you did it. We always end up doing that. But I start seeing the faults of my parents, their hang-ups, the chink in the armor, I start seeing that they have weaknesses. But it's very important that honor entails that I accept my parents in spite of their weaknesses. Because again, there's no perfect parents. Why? Why do I need to accept them in spite of their weaknesses? Well, this isn't rocket science, but because I'm stuck with them. The reality is, good families are built on healthy relationships. And these relationships are held together when I accept people based even on their weaknesses, that I accept them. And not only do I accept, but I appreciate them. Well, here's what accepting does not mean. Acceptance does not mean pretending that my parents were perfect, right? We already covered that. They're not. Acceptance doesn't mean that I'm ignoring their mistakes, because some of you in here cannot ignore the mistakes because they've dramatically changed your life, the mistakes that your parents have made with you. Acceptance doesn't mean that I agree with everything they did, because I don't. Acceptance doesn't mean that I'm agreeing with everything they asked me to do, because I don't agree with that. Acceptance means this. Acceptance means realizing that God used them to bring me into this world. And I'm telling you, the message that we're talking about today is we're really talking about most normal families. But I realize that there's families on either side of the spectrum. There are some families, and you might be a part of this, where you're sitting here today and you're like, dude, I had great parents. I feel like my parents really poured into me and honored me. And it's easy to honor my parents because they were honorable. Some of you have that blessing. Some of you are not even close to that, though. And you're way over on this side of the spectrum. And you're like, dude, my parents are dead to me. I have nothing with them. I've been cut off from them. Or I've cut them off. Or they have hurt me so bad, I can't even go there. And so I realize that there are people, and you, sitting here on either side of the spectrum. But no matter where you're at, honor can be brought by accepting the fact that God used them to bring you into this world. Isn't that amazing? Honor comes through that. Whether they were an excellent parent, mediocre, poor, regardless of how they treated you, God chose them. Isn't that cool? God chose them. Acceptance also means listening to what your parents have to say. Proverbs 23:22 says it this way. Listen with respect to the father who raised you. We need to listen to our parents and don't tune them out. That's part of acceptance. All right, acceptance also means, well, it includes forgiveness. You know, the fact is that the closer we live together, the more we tend to hurt each other, don't we? Whether it be intentional, and some of you are seriously the victims of that, whether it's intentional or unintentional. I'm just going to start taking funds and putting them away now for future counseling for my kids, because I know I'm going to screw them up somehow. Unintentionally, I'm going to do something, right? Because there's no perfect parent out there. But acceptance means, and for me to my parents, acceptance means that I forgive them. This is critical. And you've heard me talk about this before. It's critical because if I do not include forgiveness in my relationship to my parents, it turns into bitterness. And bitterness leads to self-destruction. And listen, bitterness destroys you more than the person that offended you. More than the person you're angry at. It is self-destructive. And God is saying part of honoring is forgiving. There's a couple more things that I want to go over here in terms of honor too. What does honor actually look like? Even now as an adult, what does it look like for you? Deuteronomy 26:11 says this, Be grateful for the good things that the Lord has given you and your family. Be grateful. Well, no matter who your parents were, or if you felt like they gave any effort at all in your life, or you feel like they did anything for you, no matter where you fall on the spectrum of parents, whether they were just off the chart fantastic or they didn't even show up. No matter where you're at, we are called to be grateful. So honor looks like this, is that I would suggest that there are several things that you can appreciate about your parents and actually put into practice right now. And the first one is to appreciate their effort. Would anyone like to agree with this? Parenting is just incredibly difficult. Anybody? Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. It's very time demanding. It's an energy drainer. Anybody looking for more sleep? I've never met a parent who's like, I've just had a lot of sleep lately. I feel like I just need to cut back. Those naps, they're a little overrated. I've never met a parent like that. I always meet parents who are just like, sleep? Seriously? That's just a luxury. I don't get that. Parenting is difficult. And as a parent, I have a new appreciation for what my parents went through raising me. Now I understand when my mother looks at me and she'll say jokingly sometimes, she goes, I hope you have a son. I didn't like your tone. I understand that now. Mom, I'm having a girl. But I understand because parenting is incredibly difficult. And part of honoring, as an adult now, honoring them is understanding and appreciate their effort. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how little their effort. God chose them to bring you into this world. And quite honestly, someone said I shouldn't say this in the first service, but I'm going to say it anyways. Quite honestly, have you ever considered that your parents' life would actually be easier if you were not here? It's true. Whoa, grab your pitchfork. Yeah, it's true. Parenting is difficult. Now, the flip side of that comment is it's the greatest blessing in the world. And I truly understand God's love more than I ever have because I have children now. It is His way of helping me be more like Him. But it ain't easy. It ain't easy. And so honoring means accepting and appreciating my parents' effort. Here's something else. It also means appreciating their sacrifice. Newsflash, kids cost a lot of money. Recently on the news, they released how much money it costs. Any takers from a baby all the way to 18? How much? I'm sorry, what? 90,000? Yeah, maybe not. A little higher than that. $250,000 is the average. Wow, that's just a chunk of change, right? Holy crow. I remember Beth and I sitting down saying, before we had Addie, saying, how can we afford this? And we're adding up like diapers and formula. We were so naive. And little tiny clothes and booties and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, I think we could probably do it on $125 a month. Right. $250,000 it costs. And so the reflection on that as a child, to know that my parents made that sacrifice for me, is I need to appreciate that sacrifice. I love this quote by Phyllis Diller. She said this: it would seem that something which means poverty, disorder, and violence every single day should be avoided entirely, but the desire to have children is a natural urge. I love that. We can bring honor to our parents. There's a couple other ways we can bring honor too that I just want to throw out to you today. That as an adult, we bring honor to our parents by affirming them and not abandoning them. I don't have to tell you this, that the older you get, it just seems like you get a little bit more lonely in life, don't you? Especially for older folks. Life gets lonely. The older you get, the less respect you get, right? And all your affirming friends who thought you were cool die off and they're not around anymore, and the marketplace that you poured your life out to doesn't need you anymore. And your grown children have their own families to be busy with, and life tends to get pretty lonely. And your parents, listen to this, your parents have a great need to feel like and know that they made some kind of positive contribution to your life. They need affirmation. Isn't it interesting how the tables turn? Have you thought about that often? That your parents who care for you later on in life, the tables turn. And part of honoring is that I can affirm my parents. And listen, how do you do that? Really practically. And I dare you to take me up on this today. Some of you need to just make a phone call when you get home today and affirm your parents. I recently told my dad that. And I told my mom that again. I just said, hey, I just want to tell you, you did a good job. I didn't get all mushy and everything and cue the music. I just said that. I just said, you know what? You were a good mom. You did good. Some of you need to make that phone call. Free nights and weekends helps. Some of you just need to write a letter too. And just maybe tell them that if you can't verbalize it, or send a card, whatever. But you are obeying this command at 50 years old, at 40, at 30, at 20. You are obeying this command to honor your father and mother when you affirm them. Because the definition of honor means to understand the significance of. That I understand the significance of what my parents did. But wait a minute, they did a lot of bad stuff. I understand that. They screwed up. Yeah, I didn't agree. They hurt me. Yes. But honor means to find the things that I can affirm them on and encourage them. Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27 gives us instruction. And this instruction is to you and me as a child. Check this out. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it when it is in your power to act. If I were to summarize this and put it in my own words, I would say you got to do the right thing while you still have time to do it. Flowers sent to a funeral don't mean anything to a dead person, do they? It just makes you feel better. You should freak your parents out and buy them that same arrangement and just send them to them now. Just blow like $200. I was just thinking of you. Send it to them. Yeah, I just thought I'd send you flowers. They would love that. The idea is to affirm your parents now, and that brings honor to them. Affirming them also means, and I just mentioned this a few moments ago, is listening to their counsel and giving them almost a courtesy of asking for counsel. Even if I don't follow it, I can still listen. I'll never forget, Beth and I went to premarital counseling before we got hitched, and it was probably the best gift that my dad ever gave to me. And I didn't realize that I needed it. I'm like, counseling, isn't it for people who need it? Yeah, then I realized I was really screwed up as we went through counseling and that everyone needs good counsel. And so we went through, what's it mean to be married and all the finances and stuff like this. And then we got to communication. And then eventually we got to, how do you interact with your parents after you're married or your in-laws? How does that work? And the gal that was counseling us, her name was Linda. She was a family friend and a licensed counselor or whatever. She looked at me and she goes, listen, here's one tactic that I use. And I'll never forget this. I thought it was so funny. And she goes, here's one tactic that I use. She goes, I call my mother all the time to see how I should fix my hair. I'm like, seriously? She goes, yeah, I call my mom up and, hey, Mom, do you think I should wear it straight or curly? Do you think I should get a perm? She goes, I listen to my mom, and then I hang up the phone. She goes, I probably will never get a perm. But this interaction, this discussing, honors our parents. It affirms them. It allows them to be a part of our life. I've never done that, by the way. And I think it applies to in-laws, too. Oh, now we're crossing the lines, right? But there are two great examples in Scripture. Moses, he got great advice, great wisdom and counsel from his father-in-law. Ruth, great wisdom and counsel from her mother-in-law. So affirming, so honoring to that in-law, to that parent. Now, here's one more thing I want to talk about. I think honoring your parents, especially as an adult, simply means not abandoning them. This can be a really touchy subject because some of you feel like you've been abandoned by your parents. Here's what the Scripture says. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 4 says this, that they should put their religion into practice. It's talking about Christ followers here. They should put their religion into practice by caring for their own family, and so repaying their parents and grandparents for this is pleasing to God. It's just not an obligation. It's actually a living out of Christ in our life. It was so important that it came up at the cross. Jesus was crucified for our sins, and as he was on the cross, nailed there, bleeding and dying, being made a mockery of, taking your sin and my sin upon him, ushering in grace in this new covenant of God's love for us, this new promise of salvation. While he was doing that, he spoke 7 things on the cross. And one of the 7 was he looked at one of his disciples, John, and he said, please take care of my mother. Do you want to know how important honoring is? At death, Jesus honored his mother by making sure that she would not be abandoned. Now listen, can't pause there too long because I only have a couple minutes left. That is a whole entire message. That is a whole entire series on how to care for your parents. I just want you to consider that. Part of honoring means that we don't abandon. Here's the challenge of the morning. Is that when this topic comes up, I even feel a little bristling. Because I have a hard time forgetting things that have been done to me. And I had pretty awesome parents. And I still have hurt. And guess what? My kids are going to have hurt because of things that I do to them unintentionally. And some of you are sitting here today, and this conversation that happened over here with these guys fishing is all too real to you. Your parents have vocally told you that they're disappointed in you. They have dropped the ball hardcore, some of them. Some of them, your parents, have totally abused you. Pick a topic. Pick an arena where that happened. And so this could be kind of a painful message because everything bristles inside of you saying, I don't want to honor my parents, and they probably don't deserve it. And you know what? They probably don't. But according to God's word, where this kingdom, the Bible talks about this kingdom being upside down, where Jesus just comes and changes the rules. One of the backwards rules here is that we are to honor, and there are no qualifiers on it. Don't you wish there was sometimes? Okay, if you don't make these 5 qualifiers, I don't have to honor you. Thank God. But it's not in there. There's no time limit. There's no age limit. There's no qualifiers. It says honor. And for some of you sitting here today that you have been deeply hurt and mistreated and neglected and all of these things, you need to know that it is not necessarily your job to hold people accountable for that because you're not capable of, but God is. Your job is to honor. It's God's job to hold accountability. Now, Jesus said this. This is not on the screen. By intention, I want you to listen. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 18, verse 6, this is him talking. He was talking about parents who mistreat their kids. Jesus said, but if you give them a hard time, if as a parent you give your kids a hard time, bullying them or taking advantage of their simple trust, you soon will wish that you had not. You'd be better off dropped in the middle of a lake with a millstone around your neck. Some of you are going, go Jesus, go. Can I frame that and put that somewhere, There is accountability for parents who have acted dishonorable. But our job as children, and I always will be a child of my Father, is to act honorable. God isn't asking me to gloss over the pain. He's not asking me to deny the pain or to repress it or make excuses. That's not what the Scripture is saying here. He's not asking me to fake it. He's asking me to honor. And quite oftentimes, I can't honor until I actually face that pain head on sometimes. To go into it. And I need to tell you, if you are here today and you are feeling just a lot of pain from your relationship with your parents, you need to ask God for the courage to go into that so that you can get through into honor. It may never go away, but honoring is not a choice. It's something that we've been commanded to do. Ask God for that courage. He knows your pain. He knows your hurt. He knows that some of you are carrying around this bitterness and this anger, and it's been now transferred in some instances into your marriage, into your spouses. You always swore you wouldn't be like your parents, but suddenly you've carried this along, and now it's being transferred to your kids. And honor is what short circuits that, because honor includes forgiveness. We talked about that. And it is only Christ who can give you the courage and the power to do that. And if you're still angry with a parent years later, I need to tell you, it's time to stop that control. And you can do that by exploring this topic of honor with your parents. There's another group of you in here that your experience might be a little different. You may not have been hurt by your parents because, quite frankly, one or more of them or both of them or whatever just kind of took off. And I know that's the story for several of you in here, that you've been on your own since your teenage years. You haven't had a parent, so why should I give them honor when they won't even stick around? How am I supposed to honor a guy who's completely absent? How am I supposed to honor a mom who wasn't even there? Well, there's special promises and encouragement from the Word on that. I want to read this to you. Psalm 27, verse 10. God says this. He says, I am assuming the responsibility for you on that. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord is going to hold me close. And if you are in that situation today and you're struggling through this topic of honor because the pain is so great, first of all, honor means forgiveness. It means going there. And I know that's a long process, and that is a whole entire time that we could spend talking together. But the other side of honor is knowing that God has you in his crosshairs. And he is saying, I step into that gap. I take responsibility for you on that. I will hold you close, regardless of your circumstance. Because here's the promise. God is perfect. He is the only perfect parent. He loves you unconditionally. A lot of us have been conditionally loved in our life. God says unconditionally, I love you. God says, will not leave you. I'm not going to forsake you. I'm not going to turn my back on you. He invites us to join his family. I'm losing my papers here. And the bottom line is he loves you more than you would ever realize. Hey, band, why don't you guys come on up and let's finish with these thoughts. As we go into a time of worship, I hope I've given you some stuff to think about today and to wrestle with. And this time of going into worship is going to look very specific to each one of you. For some of you, it's a conversation you need to have with God about the anger and the bitterness that you've got inside of you towards your parents. And it might be time to just say, God, I've been carrying around this for a long time. I can't even begin to think about honoring because I can't even deal with this topic. And today I'm telling you, God says, give it to me. And during this time of worship, you may just need to, for the very first time ever, to have that conversation with God. So take it. Take it. For others of you, you might be struggling with a lot of hurt and pain because of what has been intentionally done to you or unintentionally been done to you. And here's the deal. God comes into that pain. Do you think really he would give us a commandment that says honor if he wouldn't help us fulfill it? I can't possibly fulfill honoring my parents unless God is in the midst of that. And God is the great healer and the physician. And today you may need to say, God, come into my pain, come into my past, come into this baggage I have in this relationship so that I can honor and obey you on this deal. And there might be another type of person, and maybe this is you in here, that maybe you're the parent we're talking about. Maybe you've really blown it and you know it. Again, maybe you're wondering if your kids are going to honor you because you haven't actually been very honorable. And maybe today you need to come before the Lord in confession. I've blown it. I have. I've walked away. I've abandoned. I've neglected. I've done these things. And part of honor means that you walk in Jesus Christ as a Christ follower and be honorable. And that's something only he can give you. We are loved by a God incredibly. In fact, as we worship, we're going to celebrate that right now. That there's a perfect Father that I have who lavished his love upon me, who did whatever it took through the death of his Son, Jesus Christ, to show me that love. We do this once a month here at K2. We like to celebrate communion. And it's just a symbol. There's nothing super magical about it, nothing magical at all. It's just a chance to really reflect and remember what God has done for me and how he has reconciled this relationship with me. Right on the night before he was killed, he got together with his disciples and they were eating, enjoying each other, and they didn't really understand what was going down. But Jesus, I mean, he totally knew. He knew. He'd been wrestling with this, and he was trying to communicate to his disciples what would happen very shortly with his crucifixion. And as they were eating, he took this bread, and he broke it, and he said, listen, this is symbolically what's going to happen to my body. My body's going to break for you. My body's going to ache for you. I'm going to bleed for you because I love you. And so would you reflect on my love often? When you get together, and we're together today, would you reflect on the mighty love of Jesus Christ? It's only that love that allows me to be honorable. It's only that love that allows me to honor because of what he has done through his grace, his death on the cross. And then he followed it up. I mean, he's driving this point home with his disciples, and he grabs the wine, and he says, listen, symbolically, this is my blood. This represents my blood. It's going to be poured out for you. Think of that image, poured out, experiencing death, emptied out. Why? Because I love you. This blood represents the forgiveness of sins. See, that's really what honor is about. As a parent, I've screwed up. I need forgiveness. As a child, I've been sinned against. I need to forgive. I can only do that